in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 179. This edition is brought to you by Dawson Tire & Wheel, your premier ag tire and wheel provider in North America, and TractorZoom, delivering insights, and the official work boot of Moving Iron Podcast is Dryshod Boots. So this week, I have a guest on every week named Shawn with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida. And Shawn is quite honestly a wealth of knowledge, and there's not much he doesn't know or follow when it comes to the ag markets and the things that affect the ag markets in a short term and in a long term. And Shawn, I first met Shawn about a year and a half ago now, and he called me out of the blue and said, "You know what? I want to talk to you about these grand solar minimums." And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then, so I started researching it, and I kind of went back to some stuff I learned in high school, some stuff I learned in college, and then I kind of started tripping some triggers, and I started remember talking about it. So this will be about the third time we've had this conversation about that. And I was talking with Shawn this week, and I was like, we probably had to do a grand solar minimum update, because last time we did this, you talked about how there was going to be an early start to spring and a little bit more dryness in the air going into planting, and that could possibly carry on into the actual growing season. So as I was sitting there looking out my window when we were talking, I noticed that it was significantly warmer than it should be this time of the year, and it was significantly drier, even out here in the desert of the Nebraska Panhandle, than it should be as well. So I was like, probably should give an update on what's going on. He goes, "You know what? There's another thing we should talk about too, and it is grand solar minimums and sun cycles as far as how these pandemics and outbreaks break out." And there's a very distinct line in time where you can see where these pandemics flare up and then die out, and they're all based around these solar cycles. So I thought, man, I'm game. Nothing more timely than that right now. So, Shawn, how you doing, man? And welcome to the show.
I'm pretty good, Casey. I'm looking forward to this discussion. It's something that everyone's starting to think about now because of what's been going on with the coronavirus and whether this is just the beginning or the end. And I think after we're done with our talk, the listeners might have a better understanding that this is probably the beginning of something, not the end of it.
Right. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear about it. So we've heard all about the coronavirus. We kind of know everything there is to know about it. We pretty well know where it came from, how it started, blah, 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 blah. And the things virus needs are cooler temperatures. The more cool, more winter-like weather that we have, the longer those kind of things last. These insurgents of cold air and those kind of things, when it warms up, then it cools off, and warms up, cools off. These are all great things for viruses. So I guess talk about what you see happening. Well, first off, where are we at in the solar cycle that we're at now? Where are we at in the trough, and what does that look like? And then how does that going to support these pandemics and stuff we see moving forward?
Well, as you correctly pointed out, I mean, we know that viruses, all kinds of viruses, not just influenza, but coronaviruses, plagues, bubonic plagues, all kinds of different viruses out there, they need three things to thrive. They need cooler temperatures, as you correctly said. They need lower humidity, and they need lower sunlight, lower UV. If they have those three conditions exist on a consistent basis, viruses that are around normally start to activate, start to spread more readily, start to mutate more. And so when we think about this, what are the features of a grand solar cycle minimum? The general feature is that you're dealing with a general cooler temperature regime. And just think of the desert in Arizona, for example, in Flagstaff. You can have 90 degrees during the day, and you can have minus 20 at night because dry air can cool very, very quickly. So when you get a polar vortex, like we had a year ago, and it's minus 30 degrees real temperature, that doesn't happen in humid air. It only can happen if you have very, very dry air. So, and of course, what does a grand solar cycle means. It means that the sunspots, the solar radiation, the UV hitting the Earth is going down. Less sun hitting the Earth, less UV hitting the Earth. It also promotes increased cloud cover. We've discussed in prior discussions about this. As cosmic rays fire up, the more clouds you have, the more it blocks the sun from coming in. So all this should conceptually, theoretically, produce the perfect conditions for much larger outbreaks of viruses throughout history. So what we do is we have a thesis, we have a hypothesis, right? And we say, well, let's go back and let's see if the evidence supports that hypothesis. So what we did with Casey is we went back to 1500 to the present day, and we looked back at all, we looked at the solar radiation relative to reported viral outbreaks throughout history. And what we found is that 70% of all epidemics, pandemics of all kinds occurred during grand solar cycle minimum phases, where the overall solar radiation was lower than the norm. That's amazing when you think about it. 70% happened during these periods of time. And so when one looks at that, given that we are just begun this next grand solar cycle, one would have expected that our first, and when you look at the 12-year solar cycle, Casey, you know, the peak to trough, they all occur primarily at the trough periods of the 12-year solar cycle. So where are we? We're at the trough of the current 12-year solar cycle. We've just begun a grand solar cycle. So the period that we would expect to be a high vulnerability to our first meaningful viral outbreak would be right about now. And just lo and behold, it's exactly it's come about. And so the cycle is repeating, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's repeating, and it's also showing the vulnerability of our food system, of our just-in-time inventory system. And there's the reasons why we go through food shortages during grand solar cycles in the past isn't only because of increased weather volatility, isn't only because of shorter growing cycles due to later frost in the spring and earlier frost in the fall. It's also because these pandemics come out and disrupt the global food system that we're under, and actually cause dynasties to fail. You've talked about this before, Casey, about how many Chinese dynasties have failed during these periods because of a lack of food and increased disease outbreaks. So this is all consistent with that. So I guess the answer is yes. Grand solar cycles have promoted, and will continue to promote greater periods of viral outbreak. There's really nothing we can do to prevent the cycle from happening. The only we can do is to do our best to adjust to it, to alter our behavior towards it, and to adjust our food system for it. So, because this, once again, this is not our last run of viral outbreak. We're going to have many more before this is over. I sure hope we don't shut the global economy down every single time we have a viral outbreak. We have to do something different. Is what I'm getting at. We really do, and I hope this is a good learning curve. That probably this wasn't the best approach to shut the whole world down like this. But maybe we have to have a better, more balanced approach going forward.
Yeah, this thing with the economy is, I mean, the first couple of weeks it was like, oh, cool, look, it's whatever, and then people started realizing, like, oh crap, I don't have a paycheck coming in, or oh crap, businessman, I don't have any revenue coming in, or then now the government's like, oh crap, we don't have any tax revenue coming in, and we are barely hanging on anyway. So, government's not known for stockpiling cash for a rainy day, so it's definitely not something they have laying around out there, and they're starting to feel the crunch from that, especially with the amount of nurses and doctors and everything else they got running around that they're trying to, EMTs and other frontline people, police, fire, all those different folks, and now they're starting to, it's getting bad, so we need to figure this out pretty quick.
Well, the problem that, I know, I'm just an observer trying to figure this out like everybody else. But when I look at what's happened up to this point, I've only seen the studies on what could the virus do in terms of how many people could die. in the U.S. and globally. And these models that they came up with and the assumptions they made, I have not seen anyone analyze what are the death consequences for shutting the economy down, for starving people around the world, for destroying their economic viability, this increased suicide, the increased alcoholism, drug abuse, violence. I mean, there are lots of studies, and I've been looking at them, that suggest that there is a huge humanitarian consequence to ruining the economic viability of people's lives that I have seen no study about. When you're trying to make a big decision, you're trying to look at different scenarios and trying to say what's the balanced approach that is the best outcome in a bad situation. And I'm not sure we have looked at the whole picture correctly. We've only focused on how many deaths can we avoid having with the coronavirus. We've not determined how can we avoid deaths from ruining the U.S. and global economy. And that's really something we need to have a much bigger discussion about when we get beyond this virus, about how to handle this better going forward. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you look at any depressed time or big recession of any kind, whether it's the 1930s or the 1980s or 2008, 2009. I mean, the number of suicides in those time frames were drastically higher. I mean, infinitely higher than they are normally. So it's just anytime there's a stressed time frame or people can't find work or they feel inadequate, there's going to be all kinds of things that come from that. And I think what we see happening here is no different than that. So I mean, I guess as the information that you and the research that you've presented over these last two episodes or last two shows that we've done have pointed to that 2021, 2022 are going to be we're heading into the worst part of this solar minimum time frame, and we're talking like a solid 10-year period here of some really strong lack of sun, solar radiation, and how the overall environment or the climate, I guess, the overall climate is going to start shifting towards some very drastic cold spells that last, like where winter starts sooner. Very warm summers, but they're 2.5, 3 months long type of thing. It's an on-off switch that kind of comes, and you're talking about snow in September time frame. So I guess coronavirus, where we're at now, these other viruses that could start popping up, and as we head into these cooler, dramatically less UV radiation than what we see now, less, more cool air, humidity, those kind of things are just going to start kind of popping up a little bit. I guess, how do you foresee the coming couple years here and how that's going to affect the overall in climate and economy, both of what we see happening?
We've always lived in a crisis economy. What I mean by that is that no one believes in a rogue wave can occur until after it occurs, and then they now realize that it was actually far more likely to occur than they originally had believed. So, for example, the September 11 attacks, prior to that, no one really believed anyone could take down, these two pillars of New York City the way that they did. But then we had an awakening. Oh my gosh, this can happen now. We're vulnerable to a terrorist attack like that.
Right.
I view this pandemic as a wake-up call that we all sort of in the back of our mind knew inherently to some degree that viruses are there and there's a risk, but this just rusted the risk squarely on our heads that we've entered a different period than the period that we've been under, where these viral outbreaks are going to be becoming more and more prevalent. And this rogue wave, this shock to the system is now awoken everybody that this is a new normal that we have to adjust to. The next part of this cycle, this grand solar cycle, is going to be this first major weather event that's coming in 2021-22. That's going to be the coronavirus moment for weather. It's going to be what absolutely is the rogue wave that no one actually, they sort of kind of have a little bit of an idea it could, but they don't really, when it happens, they're going to go, oh my gosh, this is what we're getting into, and this is not the last of these. I think we're really going through a awakening to what this new cycle is. And what the 2021 cycle is, if we want to repeat it, we certainly can, is this. A La Nina is coming. This is the transition year, as we talked about before, but 2021-22 is the first La Nina in this new 200-year cycle, grand solar cycle that we've just entered into. That means extraordinarily long, cold, polar vortex-infested winter, very, very short growing season, but hot, dry summer. And so when you think this through, Casey, about what this is going to look like, it's going to look like something like extremely late frost in the spring, blisteringly hot drought conditions in the summer, extremely early fall frost, and an endless, never-ending winter until the following spring. And if you think about we had a little bit of a flavor of that last year, right? Mm. We had this never-ending spring, endless rain, late frost, growing season. We had a little bit of a teaser, and it was really bad one. I mean, it was really bad. But it's really mild compared to what I believe we're going to be talking about after we get through that period of time. And once we get through that, the good news is I believe everyone's eyes will be wide open to what we're facing. And once everyone's wide open to what we're facing, then solutions can come forth about how do we address the situation. If everyone continues to be in more of a denial state or not really absorbing or taking the risks seriously or not willing to act on it, we need to have the crisis first, unfortunately, before we get aggressive action to remedy it. And so that's where I think that we're at, and we're right on the doorstep to this. I don't want to see this. I've told you this before. I'm a business of making correct forecasts, and that's my job, and that's how I stay in business. This is one of the forecasts that I really, really, really hope and pray that I've always said that I wish this forecast turned out to be correct, because I really don't wish this upon myself, my family, or yours.
Right.
But everything that I see, all the evidence so far, all the signposts that I've been looking to follow, we talked about following, are actually all occurring and confirming we're heading down this path. And so I don't see anything that suggests that this forecast is going to be proven to be anything but correct as we move into this period of time. And it's going to take the vulnerability of our just-in-time food system that we're all now getting concerned about, and it's now going to throw into that mix an actual food shortage. And so that's going to cause very, very high ag prices. It's going to cause a lot of money to go into the ag sector, believe it or not, after a decade of no money going into the sector. And solutions are going to come forward. I am not a Debbie Downer. I'm not a doomsdayer. I'm not an apocalyptic. It's Armageddon. I'm a realist, but there is a pathway forward, and we will get through this. But unfortunately, the nasty part of the crisis is in front of us first before we can get to the other side of the solutions that need to happen. So.
Okay, so now let's talk about food supply, what that looks like. If you take a look at where we're at now, we have historic supply. We've got, especially right now with what's going on with ethanol plants and the way that looks. I mean, 40% of the U.S. corn crop goes into ethanol production. So we have a potential to have a very large supply of corn. Obviously, when oil prices rebound back the other way and they start going back up, and then ethanol becomes something that makes sense again, there's going to be an opportunity to eat up that 40% of that corn supply to get back into the ethanol business. But no one seems to know when that is. The Saudis decided they were going to kind of test the waters with the Russians about who controlled more of the oil market and so on and so forth, and they proved that they could do it. But also at the same time, the coronavirus really snuck up on them and did a number that they weren't necessarily. I mean, I think they knew the economy was going to slow down, and they knew that was the right thing to do, but they didn't realize it was going to cut as deep as it did, not just in the U.S. or in Europe, but worldwide, and what that looks like. I've made the comment a couple times. My wife has been home, with our children since it started for the past 5 weeks, and she hasn't got a tank of gas in 5 weeks. I mean, so whatever fuel she had when this took place till now, she still has. So, and I'm sure that's the same across everywhere. I'm sure there's very few people that have gotten fuel over the time frame. So, I guess until that economy starts popping back up and things start rolling and get taken off and doing what we're saying to happen. This oil thing is going to be here, right? So let's talk about the food shortage and stuff you talked about rolling in 2021 and viruses and how that works. And then what are we going to do? I mean, how does it work? What are some of the answers or some of the steps that you see that we should be taking now and into the future to mitigate any kind of economic hiccups we see here?
Well, first of all, the worst thing that could happen going into this 2021-22 weather scenario is to have what just took place with this virus.
Right.
We're destroying farmers' balance sheets. We're destroying the just-in-time inventory food system globally. We're destroying trade. And we're telling every producer, stop producing everything now. And so they will stop producing everything now. We're going to see it across the board, including crude oil and everything else. And so right now we're in the demand immediately stopped, but the supply keeps going for a while. And so we have this, as you said, this oversupply that's made oil go negative because we didn't have storage for it for a little while. That's the negative part. But then that's the yin. The yang of this is, as you move out to later in the year, and especially to 21 and 22, the supply now then falls, and then this demand starts going back up. And there's no one to supply it anytime soon. Even after prices get back to something more favorable to the farmer and the producer, their balance sheets are so destroyed, it's going to be years before they even think about doing anything other than rebuilding the balance sheets.
Right.
Maybe buying a new piece of equipment after having the used equipment they've been using for a while. I mean, I'm just talking out loud that it's going to be a while after destroying the food system that we've done to get that going. So we're going to have this significant lack of imbalance between demand being above supply for an extended period of time at a time that our production is going to be hit even further. It's really the perfect storm. If you had to dial in how to maximize the shortages that were already going to be coming, having this virus right now, I mean, it's almost, you just couldn't have written a more perfect script to maximize that trauma, if you want to call it that way. So what should people do? What can people do? What should governments do? Well, I think every government realizes that this just-in-time inventory situation is no longer viable. In this new weather and viral-infested pattern that we're in, having just enough food on hand is no longer going to cut it. And we've been seeing India halting rice exports, for example. We've been seeing Russia saying we're not going to be selling any more wheat after May because we're afraid to lose any more of our wheat supplies. We're seeing the hoarding. We're seeing the stockpiles already begun. But those countries that do not produce enough of their own food are already realizing they are in a bad, bad place. So countries are starting to do what they should have been doing long ago, which is stockpile some food, get some reserves up, especially those things that their people need to have to survive on. The other thing is, as individuals, you, me, we need to have more food on hand than a couple of days.
Right.
So we need to have more food. When you're going out 65% of all Americans were going out for their food needs on a weekly basis. That ain't going to happen again. I mean, we're going to be doing a situation where we need to have 3 months of food on hand in various capacities, or 6 months of food on hand. Each individual needs to have, kind of an ability that if for whatever reason, we have a virus that shuts things down, or the shelves are empty, or the weather's so bad that they can't transport the food from the Midwest to where it needs to go, like we saw, where there was transportation problems because of the snow from getting it from the California to the Midwest and such. That we ourselves need to have food that we can rely on ourselves, to have our own food, look, everyone knows you can have your own greenhouse, a garden in the back, and you can start growing stuff and doing things. And I just think we need to get a little more independent ourselves. Think about local production, local farmers serving the local community, versus, buying our produce from Mexico and bringing it in. I'm thinking out loud now, but I think that we realize that if our food system just in time is breaking down and we are, destroying that system, and we need to get more independent of that, and we need to be thinking about how we can do things more locally and ourselves to stockpile food and be less dependent upon a system that may or may not serve us as we get further on into this cycle and things get more difficult to manage.
Yeah, that's definitely something that is out there right now. I think more people are looking at, especially what's happening with, just look at the supply chain, right? Yeah. Our supply chain, it's not a lack of supply. It's the supply chain that is screwing things up, right? It's the fact that there's a segment of food production that goes to the consumer, the grocery stores, those kind of things, and you have another segment that goes over here to the guy that has a restaurant and is buying a 10-pound tube of hamburger and 5 pounds of shredded cheese, right? And how that gets packaged and what that looks like. You have entire factories set up, food processing plants, those kind of things that are set up to do just that, right? And then you've got what's going on over here. So, that is and it's a horrible injustice when you look at food shelves that are barren, and now they're out there dumping milk, or they're cattle. There's cattle in feedlots that can't go anywhere because there's nowhere to take them. Our processing plants are shut down and those kind of things. So being more proactive is definitely a big thing.
Well, the other thing too is, should 5 meat packing houses control so much of the market that they can have record margins, but yet they can't process all the animals for the demand that's needed for them. There's a lot of questions here about how we got ourselves into this delicate food distribution system that was just thrown under the bus. And I think there's investigations going on, as regarding that whole thing. And I do hope that there's some solutions that start to mitigate some of that risk. The other thing, in terms of, look, viruses are going to come. We can't stop them. We can do what we can to prevent getting infected by viruses, but you can't reduce the risk to zero unless you want to just live in your house and never go out. And if you want to live your life that way, certainly that's a solution. But a bigger thing is to just have better overall health. What are the natural vitamins that have study after study that support one's immune system? We know vitamin C and vitamin D in our work continues to show up as two of the most important vitamins that help support one's immune system, and that many sick people, when they look at what they lack vitamin C and vitamin D in their diets and in their composition. And so, I would think that I've been looking at the data that orange juice sales are up something like 25 to 30% over the last 30 days, and we've been on a 15-year downtrend for orange juice consumption. But now people are beginning to realize that having a cup of OJ every morning, maybe our grandparents weren't so stupid after all for doing it. Maybe they actually knew that was a good thing to do. We're just outside of the whole idea. So, being in better shape, going for a run, I think if reducing the stress, all these things will help you, fight off more viruses than not. And even if you do get it, being able to fight it off. Most people are getting the coronavirus and are getting cured. Are getting through it and are fine. We're focusing on the 0.5% that are having a problem, but most people are okay with this. They get it. They feel bad for a while. After a week, they come out of it and they're okay. So we want to be that person. You want to be that person that gets it. And I'm not feeling so good, but you come out of it. And so you got to take your own health upon yourself, on your family, to do something. I think we've all been guilty of maybe lacking on the diet side and the exercise side, and being too stressed, doing too many things at one time, and we're paying the price for it a little bit. And maybe this is a wake-up call to to reconsider what's important in our lives and how we really want to go about, going through what's left of it, because we never know when our last day may be. I don't want it morbid here, but I don't know. I could get in the car today to go to the gas station and I don't make it back. It's possible,
Well, if you go to the gas station in a car wreck, you're going to be the only one there, man. So you must have hit a pole or something on the way over there.
Well, I'm measuring how many weeks to the gallon.
Right on, there you go.
Not how many gallons, how many weeks to the gallon. I'm getting 3 weeks to the gallon right
now. I hear that. Well, Shawn, this is interesting as usual. Always good stuff. Love talking about this stuff and what the future holds, what that looks like. And quite frankly, everything you said that we've talked about so far when I first met you till now about weather and how these solar cycles are affecting everything involved. It's all happened. So I mean, with some staggering accuracy. So I was hoping one of these days you'd be wrong, but dang it, Shawn, you're not going to be wrong on this one either. So
pray I'm wrong about 21-22. Just I actually want to be proven wrong. I really do. But until then, I'm going with that forecast.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to be right. So,
yeah.
Well, Shawn, good stuff. So you have you got a website out there, Hackett Financial or HackettAdvisors.com, and check that out. Is there anything else that you have out there right now that's worth people taking a look at?
Well, I mean, we have our natural cycle report that I know a lot of your listeners have already requested. We do have our work on pandemics, which is a separate report that we did. We focused on pandemics and the history of them and the viral pathway we talked about in February, that April would likely be the peak for U.S. and EU infections. It looks like that is in fact occurring, and we also talked about how markets typically react post-virus. So those reports are really what we call special reports that we put up from time to time when we really think something's important that we want to talk about separate from our normal weekly report. We talk about markets and capital flows and more near-term stuff. But I think if your listeners haven't had a chance to read either the natural cycle paper that we wrote or the pandemic paper they wrote, I think they would really find them very informative and give them a perspective on where we are and where we're going so that they can prepare whatever they need to for their business and their personal lives.
Right on. Where do they get those reports at?
I would say that the best way to do that, Casey, is to just email us at Shawn, SHAWN as in Nancy, at Hackett, HACKETT, advisors.com. Just email us, say, hey, I heard Shawn, Moving Iron podcast, we talked about a couple of these reports. Could you send it to me, and we'll just get it right out to your listeners, for free.
Yep. Check it out, man. It's worth the email because the information that you get. He sends me those reports, and I read them, and it's great information. So do yourself a favor and send Shawn an email and ask him for those reports because it's good stuff. So, well, Shawn, good stuff as usual, man. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on a Saturday morning, and hopefully happy Saturday.
You got to go move some rocks, baby. Got to move some rocks. All right. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Also, check out movingironllc.com for all the latest blog posts that I've put out there. I'm working on one now. Hopefully, I'll have it out here in the next, hopefully this weekend, if not first part of next week. And check out the Global Ag Network and all the great podcasters out there as well. Also, if you want to attend the Moving Iron Summit in Nashville, Tennessee, September 1 through 3, you can listen to Shawn give a uplifting presentation on what's going to happen with the markets here coming up. So it's going to be good stuff. And as usual, Shawn's presentations, if you haven't seen them, are well worth your time to check out. So until next time, I am Casey Seymour, Shawn Hackett. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving iron.